Welcome to another edition of Strange New Pod. I am your Fleet Admiral. Yes, Fleet Admiral. I got a promotion last week from Giraffe. So I am now an Admiral. Yes, your Fleet Admiral and host, Julian Brown, alongside my lone bridge crew member tonight. But we're going to nerd out. It's going to be fun. I'm giving him a promotion because promotions are being handed out. It's Commander Hawk.
I've made it.
You've made it. Just one more pip to captain. What's Cisco say to Worf? Wait till you have a fourth pip on that uniform.
Yeah, then the pressure really starts.
Yep. Just the two of us tonight, man. Admiral Eric is on shore leave for 2 more weeks, and he'll be back for Lower Deck Season 3. And Draft's taking the night off, well-deserved night off. So how you doing, man?
Not too bad. Yeah, no, she deservedly so after the programming job she did last week, and with all the guests, everybody pouring in all their condolences for Nichelle Nichols passing. It was amazing.
Yeah, what an episode. And if you haven't had a chance to go back and watch or listen to our tribute to Nichelle Nichols, go ahead and do that. It's on YouTube. It's on your favorite podcast player. Just a beautiful kind of memorial and tribute to just an amazing life that she led. So go back and listen to that if you haven't yet. This week we're gonna nerd out about courtroom shit because these are like the episodes that you and I love, Hawk. We even have the sound effect for it tonight. This week, Drumhead. Yeah, we don't have that one. Measure of a Man. We don't have that one either. Court Martial. No, we talked about that like one of the first episodes of our podcast ever. Yeah, we've talked about those episodes like at length on the pod before. So we're gonna talk about some
deep dive.
Yeah, some deep dives into other great Trek courtroom dramas that deserve some love. So yeah, early days of Enterprise, all the way to Voyager, Discovery and Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks. Well, Lower Decks kind of tricked us with you thought this was our trial? This is my daughter's 11th birthday party. So they haven't gotten quite there yet, but it's going to be fun with what we have. The episodes that we're going to be talking about tonight include Enterprise's Judgment, which we just finished watching on the Discord along with what was the one that we watched? Voyager's Death Wish. We just watched those two back to back before the pod tonight, as well as TNG's A Matter of Perspective, which honestly is not really a great episode.
I'm gonna argue.
Hawk's gonna argue against it.
We'll get to that, but yeah, we will get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Captain Angel 1701 says, "Hey guys, glad to see you streaming. Well, we're happy to be here, beaming into your Twitch channels. This is going to be a fun night." And then we also have 2 great episodes of DS9, minus like creepy Julian in the beginning. DS9's he's so bad. We have DS9's Dax, and we have DS9's Rules of Engagement, which is actually one of my favorite episodes of DS9 ever. So we're going to talk about those. But before we do that, Hawk, we need to thank our patron collective at the Ready Room level and above, please.
We absolutely do. Let me just get my Patreon list done. So thanks, Simon Stager, Jeff Reeve, Mariah Gossett, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Joe Saporito, Noe Santos, Kang Wee, Haven, Takako Nagumo, Kara Kennedy, Mark, Fernando Nogales, SMK, Ian Davies, Laura Linderman, Koolian Night Spray, also known as
Reasonable Stranger. Hopefully Trav doesn't yell at us for the bad accent.
Yeah. Oh, she will.
Yeah, she will. She absolutely will.
Colin Davidson, Jesse Desmond, Alan Davis, Shatterhand 2049, Jesco, MC Frodis, Maggie, Michael Graham, Emily and Travis, Gildara, Cassie, Raul, Summer Ritchie, supporter of human rights, Maggie Light, Canada, 33 million strong.
Canada! Don't blame Canada, or do. I don't know. It's up to you.
Well, we are actually a real country anyways. Wayne Ritz, Scone of Arc, Sean, Jay Howard, Anna Yurdadon, Ella, and our newest collective member, Mahalani Uchiyama. Hopefully I pronounced your name
I think
right.
You got that right? Yeah. Butch Lepre writes, feels kind of laid back tonight. I like it. Yeah, laid back is fun. Laid back pods are my favorite pods. That's what this whole thing is about. Before I forget though, since we have the fancy sound effects now, we'll give some of these for our awesome patron collective. Yeah. That's enough of that. Give me 1 second because I got to let the dog in the other bedroom. 1 second. All the dogs are going to bed. They had a doggy play date earlier today.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I had like four dogs in my backyard. It was great. They were all just chasing each other and nibbling. It was fantastic.
That's amazing.
Destroying Drax, this is Cassie from the Discord. And yes, I did make a Twitch account just to use the chat. Yay, the chat is fun. Chat is good. Hopefully there's not too much more buffering on your end. We'll see. I feel like we're just like moving right along, which is never a bad thing. Hawk, did you have anything interesting going on Star Trek wise before we get to the strange new loop?
Star Trek wise, no, not really. It's actually been a little quiet on that front.
Yeah, right. A couple more weeks to Lower Decks, and then things will get really loud.
Yeah,
like this kind of loud.
Ooh, this is the new shuttle with the blast shield. Yeah, the blast shield is the blast shield. It comes down and it goes up. Blast shield.
I'm like counting down the days. I can't wait. I will say, actually, I will say in news, in 12, 13, 14, 15, in 4 days, I shouldn't have had to count on my fingers. In 4 days, our Lower Decks rewatch will start on the Discord, and we will be doing a nightly mystery giveaway. Mystery because what we're giving away, we technically shouldn't be giving away. And the big thing to put out here is you can't tell anybody about it. You're just going to get it in the mail and you're going to say, thank you very much, and never tell anybody what it is. But it's really cool. And we're giving it away.
We're naughty like that.
Yeah, we are naughty like that, but it's going to be really fun. So the other bit with that is that we're going to be doing a really fun grand prize for that as well. A Tendy pin from Fansets, Lower Deck Season 2 on Blu-ray. So that's part of the grand prize. So yeah, lots to look forward to.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
That is going to be fun. Dude, Lower Decks I feel like Lower Decks is like what got the pod going, right? Like back in season 1, that's like what we first started reviewing. So
yeah, because we were just geeking out on how good it was, right?
Yep. I'm so intrigued by this mystery giveaway, says Destroying Drax. Yes. My Mr. Burns fingers. Yes. No, not all the giveaways are going to be U.S. residents only. The mystery giveaway will be available to everyone. The grand prize, unfortunately, because of laws with Blu-rays and where you can send them, and also with regions and other things with studios, is U.S. based, unfortunately. That's not that we don't want to send it to you or just have you pay us some shipping for it. It's because we're not supposed to. So kind of draw the line. We got away with it when we were small. We can't really do it anymore, unfortunately. So
yeah, we're getting noticed.
Yeah, we're getting noticed. So Spotted Giraffe in the chat. Look at you two. Yeah, we're sexy and we know it. Don't forget it. Speaking of sexy, it's back. It's better. We love it. It's the Strange New Loop. And it's going to be a fun one this week. And it's also our mailbag for this week. So get ready for that later on. But Hawk, if you could go back to any moment in Star Trek and put someone on trial for something that they got away with, or something that you think they got away with that maybe other people didn't think they got away with, who would it be and why?
Oh, this was a hard one. I was trying to come up with one. So my pick, just out of pure fun, would it be to put Janeway on trial for the murder of Tuvix.
I fucking hate you. Awful. Awful.
No, I mean, there was like, it was, it's a mainstay in the memes, the murder of Tuvix. There's some murder, I suppose, in that, but I mean, hey, it was the Delta Quadrant and tough decisions had to be made. But wouldn't it be fun to put her on trial for that?
Captain Angel 1701 says, what is a Strange New Loop? The Strange New Loop is a segment that we didn't do during Strange New Worlds because we had tons of other things to talk about. But it's a fun little question that we all get to answer before we get into like the main meat of the podcast. So that's what the Strange New Loop is. It is back and better than ever. Spotted Giraffe, we do not talk about Tuvix. And says Archer should be in jail. It's true. I'm is a trial necessary? Maybe. Would it be thrown out or ruled in Janeway's favor for doing the right thing? Absolutely.
Like I say, it comes up in memes all the time. I thought it'd just be fun to throw that out there.
Fucking Tuvix. That's one of the mailbags later on. I forget whose it is, but yeah.
Yeah, I read ahead.
Riftwood writes, put Tuvix on trial. I see. Now we're talking. There's going to be a lot of Archer hate on this podcast tonight.
Bring it.
One of our Twitch, it was Haven wrote, I would put Archer on trial for the death of Sim. One of the many things Archer should be put on trial for. Yes, agreed. For me, I would also put Archer on trial for genocide of not curing the people of that planet who were dying because of the other people basically like treating them basically as like slave labor. And Phlox is like, hey, we can cure them. And Archer's like, the Prime Directive, even though we don't have the Prime Directive yet. And I'm just going to let like millions and millions of people die, even though we have a cure. Dude, Archer should be in jail like 5 times over. And like someone else, like T'Pol should have been captain. Like honestly, Admiral Farr should have taken a freaking, Pip down and gone down to captain and taken command of the Enterprise. That would have been an interesting show. But man, I'm just thinking
of that time Archer left those Illyrians stranded after taking their warp coil.
Yeah, these are just like the as Giraffe said on Discord earlier, the trips of the Archer iceberg. So yeah,
nice one.
Mayweather captain, Giraffe says. Yeah, I'd watch that too. Captain Angel 1701 says I would put the Code on trial for his actions at 359. Were they trying to say Picard? Picard. So. They were Picard. Okay, Hawk. Is Picard liable for what happened at the Battle of Wolf 359? Yes or no?
Oh. That is a tough one. Well, I mean, if he's guilty in that, then I think somebody else might be guilty in that. That's coming up in one of the episodes we're going to be discussing tonight. And that.
Okay, is that your answer? I like it. I'm just going to say no immediately because he was assimilated, and that's what the board.
Yeah, no, he was not in control of himself.
No, agreed.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Let's get right down to this. We have 5 episodes to talk about tonight, and we're going to start as we do in chronological order and just get the worst out of the way. Eric would kill me for saying that. Enterprise time. We are talking about the 2nd season episode Judgment. And before we get into some of these questions, just Hawk, your overall thoughts on this episode, which brings the Klingons back to the Enterprise fold.
Yeah, as you mentioned in that, obviously a great throwback to Star Trek 6 and the whole trial process. It was a really good episode. I don't feel like I can really get into more detail than that until we get into the actual question, but it's actually one of my favorite episodes of Enterprise.
Yeah, it's actually it is a really good episode. I feel like the last time I watched it, I was like half asleep, so I didn't enjoy it as much as I did, but I watched it again tonight, and I really enjoyed it. Is it like very much a throwback to Undiscovered Country? Yes. Does that matter? No. I like that they were just like, oh, well, we brought Worf to be like a general and like a proskater in Undiscovered Country, so we'll bring Martok back for this one.
Damn right.
Yeah, damn right. Like, I'm gonna break for a second to read Giraffe's comment because it's really good. Neelix needs to go in cultural competency and sensitivity training. It's true.
Giraffe hates Neelix.
Oh my god, so much. Yes, we do have some new people in chat. Captain Angel 1701, who we still don't know who it is, though apparently we might know them. So yeah. Yeah, it's a fun episode. It's, anytime like JG Hertzog? I always forget. But anytime he's who plays Martok, anytime he's on TV, he's fantastic. And Klingons, like I really like the aesthetic of this episode, showing like, the Klingons weren't quite as advanced yet. Things were still like stone. They still used actual like lock and key. There were fires. I mean, the Klingons never stopped using fire, but like everything was like torchlit. Costuming was great. This is a great episode. Like we said, I mean, we're just gonna keep saying it. It is a throwback, and almost like I don't know if it's like perjury because it's the same people working on it, but it's like so many shot for shot Star Trek 6 moments. The sets to Repente, Klingon judgment in this episode. What did we think about that?
It's like we mentioned about how it's a throwback, but it's also a more detailed kind of look at what was going on with Klingon justice at that time, in the particular time of the franchise, and like seeking justice in Klingon society that was in total lockstep, towards their colonizing efforts and the dignity of the empire. And that it's like, even as the advocate said, in that it's 20 years ago. He was Klingon judgment was much more focused on seeking justice and that, not just advancing the cause of the empire.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see. Yeah, in this they were set on casting themselves as an aggrieved party, even though it was like just a bunch of people they stole all their supplies from.
It's very routine Klingon for them to do this, right? It seems to happen quite a bit in with the Klingons. Like it's always something being done wrong to them. They can never take responsibility, and then there's sham trials like this.
Yeah. Well, in this case, there was so much going on in that. I mean, like Duras had his basically had his dignity robbed by Archer, and you see the consequence of that, demoted to weapons specialist from captain.
Duras is always getting the stick, man. No pun intended, because the pain sticks, but. I actually thought the actor that got to play Duras in this looked very much like the actor who played him in TNG. I thought that was very cool because I don't think it is the same actor, but you could see that this is definitely an ancestor relative of Duras, which was a great move on their production's part.
And kind of sets up like a little bit of a timeline in that, because the Duras family is, had always been seen as a little aggrieved in that, and a little kind of put down in that, in their perspective, and that by the rest of the empire and that. And I think might be where it started, right?
I mean, you would have to think so, right? I mean, it's just like blow after blow after blow to that family. So, yeah, that would actually be very interesting if this is just like every single time they are aggrieved somehow, and then it makes it look like they might have a bit of a case in the future. But let's go on, because as I'm watching this episode, Klingon law on film and television, whether it's an ascension the rite of ascension, or Worf's disaccommodation ceremony on Kronos, anytime it's been portrayed, it's always been more theater than the practice of law. Even when in TNG, when Picard is the arbiter of succession, with Gowron and Duras, like there's so much theater when it comes to Klingon law and traditions. And it always seems to just, it's that like guilty until proven innocent. And even then, like you're kind of just always going to be guilty because that's how Klingons work. What did we think about that?
I mean, yeah, it is a lot of it is theater in that. I mean, like the freaking judge's gavel and tell me that isn't meant to inspire fear, among more than anything else. But like I said, in that case, like with the with the Worf's trial and that, it was more about protecting the dignity of the empire and that than actually seeking the truth.
Yep.
Yeah. And in this case, it was it was exactly the same. Duras wanted to be seen as defending the empire and putting down like these rebels and that, who were basically just these starving colonists. They stole all their food, they stole all their fuel, and that they were supposed to look after them as part of like the terms of Klingons taking over the colony and that, and they just left them to starve and that. And then when they went and tried to get help, they almost got obliterated.
Yep. I love the theater of. I mean, we're theater geeks, right? Like I love the theater of Klingon drama. Is it good law? No, not at all. Do people like always get the worst punishment? Yes, but is it fun to watch? Absolutely. Like it's always shot well. Like when Worf has to accept his accommodation and all the Klingons do like the X and turn their backs. Like it there's always these great moments. Like when Archer is in this episode, when he's sentenced for life imprisonment in Rurapente, you know, just the fact that I can't remember his counsel's name, but the guy played by Martok's actor, you know, going to bat for him. Like there's just drama and like levity in that too, right? Kolos, yeah. So I love the drama. It does not make for good law, but it is a hell of a fun time to watch every single time. So
I love that comment. It's like, I hope they aren't my jury, and then there are no juries here.
Haven, also strange new pod. The actor who played Duras in Enterprise is surprisingly the Zaldan crewmate from TNG's Coming of Age, Daniel Riordan. Wow. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Which one was that?
The Coming of Age that's not the one with Worf and when what's his name dies, his mother dies, and he basically takes him in. Is that the same episode? I don't think so.
No.
I just recommended the episode to someone, but I don't think it's Coming of Age. Chat, let us know what the episode Coming of Age is.
Haven Wright says Wesley Crusher.
Oh, there we go.
The Starfleet Academy entrance exam on the representative Starfleet Command Conductor.
It's a fucked up episode.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a screwed up episode. That's like where we first learn that Starfleet like puts your worst fears in their simulations, and that's how you get into the academy. It's awful. Spotted Giraffe is leaving us. Her head is spinning. We will talk to you later. Feel better.
Good night, Giraffe.
See you next week. Anything else on Enterprise's judgment before we move on to the next episode?
I think I'm good. I think I've gotten all my points out.
All right. Well, we go from Enterprise. We're skipping over TOS, though. If you do want to watch TOS courtroom dramas, you have a good amount of episodes to choose from. You could watch Court Martial, which is a good episode, and obviously Menagerie Part 1 and 2, which has to do with Captain Pike as well. So that's always a really, really good episode of TOS to watch. So let's get it. Go ahead.
Wolf in the Fold as well.
Which one is that?
That one's the one where Scotty is accused of murdering that woman on I can't remember. I think Rigel 7. No, Rigel 7.
I think I know what you're talking about.
You know that one?
Yeah.
He's caught like red-handed with a bloody dagger in his hand.
Yeah.
But no memory of the actual crime.
Let's move on to TNG, A Matter of Perspective. And I know earlier, Hawk, I said that I didn't like this episode very much, but you wanted to argue against that.
Well, it might not be the greatest episode, but its inspiration was actually pretty great. It was written by Ed Zuckerman, but it was inspired by the old Akira Kurosawa film Rashomon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Have you ever seen it? Very good film, like 1950. It has to do with a crime that's committed, but every single person involved in the actual crime remembers the events differently.
Okay.
So the truth
and that's this episode.
Yeah, the truth is very elusive in that, especially when you're dealing with people's perspectives and, their own personal inclinations.
I think what I didn't like about this episode was like I feel like they tried way too hard. Like they over pushed trying to make Riker look guilty as all hell. Like when, at the beginning when Riker's like, Captain, can I have a word with you? And Jean-Luc's like, number one, given the circumstances, I think that would be highly inappropriate. And I'm just like, of course you'd have a word with him. You know he's not guilty. Come on, man. Like, and just like the looks from Deanna, the looks from Worf, even the looks from Data, who Data doesn't give looks and he's even given looks. I didn't like that. I was just like, come on, man. Like, we know he's not going to be guilty by the end of this episode. Stop like making him look like he's sweating like through his whole jumpsuit. I don't know. I
know, but Riker's your boy.
I know. I'm a little bit biased, a lot biased. Okay. I just thought that it felt like it felt like soap opera this episode. Like a really bad soap opera. But it's got some interesting law. Let's get into it. Like I said, I think it's weird. It does start with making Will look guilty as hell. We know that's never going to happen. But what do we feel about, right? Because the holodeck is used extensively in this episode, and that's the way that quote unquote facts are shown. They were presented using holodeck recreations using testimony, which isn't really facts, right? Like, should the holodeck be used to factor in an extradition hearing?
Yeah, that's a really kind of difficult question on that, because I mean, this came up in court martial, right? The computer was relied upon for this, testimony and to present actual evidence, that Kirk was guilty, right?
And I'll interject with that too. The computer was also used in Kirk's trial in Undiscovered Country with the 2 torpedoes. The computer said 2 torpedoes were fired from Enterprise. So,
yep.
Yeah.
But see, this is the problem: is that it's still just a computer. It's still just a machine that has to be programmed and told exactly what to do and and how to think and how to project. And it gets even worse with the holodeck, because the holodeck is all story based. You can look incredibly realistic in that, and that in itself is really bad if you're for a court trial, right? Because people tend to believe what they see and
Yes.
things they hear.
Yep.
Right. So you can really, if you're telling the holodeck to make Will look guilty, and it can make him look really
right.
guilty.
It shows Will talking like Will doesn't talk like that. It's the same thing when Duras in Judgment is talking about Archer, like being like, death to the Empire. It's like, listen, Jonathan Archer is not the greatest human being in the world, but he'd never say death to the Empire. Will Riker wouldn't, like as he's transporting, like just in cold blood shoot a phaser to make a fucking space station explode,
or pretty much try and rape
that as well. Yeah. I mean, listen, does Will Riker like to wine and dine? Yeah, but he's also usually pretty damn respectful about it. So just a weird episode, weird use of the holodeck. But you were talking about, Hawk, you were talking about the use of the computer. And what's interesting about this is that they don't have, let's say, Geordi or Reg make the recreations. They go to Data, who, we know that Data is sentient, but he's also a walking, talking computer. And that's who Picard goes to program these. Does that give it any more legitimacy?
Not necessarily in that, because he's still basically relying on human, or it's in the case of the aggrieved people in that their testimony in that, personal testimony. And again with Rashomon and that, people have needs. They have needs to lie.
Yeah.
In Rashomon, everybody lies, and that there's no way it happened that how wildly different it happened. And in this, even the dead man had reason to lie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, and I know it gets thrown out of whack because Troy says, like, I sense no deception from her in that, but then again, she was an alien species, and maybe Dion couldn't read in that, but the same time, they were relying on her testimony and that plugged into the computer and that, and it looks damning in that. And if you are lying, then
it was also, I feel like, a little too convenient in this episode to have Deanna like not be able to read them, because that could have solved the whole thing, right? Be like, Deanna, are they lying? Why, yes, Captain. Extradition denied. Goodbye. Roll credits. End of story. I feel like we've answered this already, but kind of as we talk about law, final verdict. Does the holodeck count as evidence?
I wouldn't count it. Like I said, it can do dramatic recreations in that, but to actually use it as like empirical evidence and fact, it's a device in which fantasy can be made into reality.
Yes,
but
exactly.
That's about it.
Yeah. Butch LePew Colin had a great comment. Going back about using the holodeck, saying, this is my biggest beef about this episode, and that perspective is always skewed when it comes to these kind of things. Whether it's shown in a holodeck, whether it's an episode of Law and Order, like there's always an ulterior motive to these things, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, about the only thing it got right in that was programming and the whole thing with the device and that was like leaving holes throughout the Enterprise.
Oh yeah, the radiation. Yeah. Yep. Haven writes, you could say that the you could say that the holographic recreation was designed to actually defend Riker. I mean, it does kind of end up defending him, right? Because like when you get there, I mean, you have a whole crew. It's almost unfair to hold the hearing on board the Enterprise, because everybody knows Will. Everybody knows Will's character. Will doesn't act that way. I mean, maybe the only person who knows him intimately to like, in a moment of like sexuality is Deanna. And I think she would also know that like, the alleged rape wouldn't have happened that way with Will. So
Yeah.
it is, I agree with Haven, designed to it does actually help defend him, throughout the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on A Matter of Perspective before we move on?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, this is also a great comment from Haven. If he wasn't innocent, the planet could say that it was also false or fake news.
I mean,
That would be the meta today. So yeah.
It doesn't matter what you saw on that. The
Nope.
truth is different.
Yeah. So let's move on to DS9, and this is an early episode. This is season 1, I believe, episode 8, and it's titled simply Dax. Thoughts on this episode, Hawk?
It's a good episode, especially for early DS9 and that, because it was still trying to find its footing. I had this like kind of a little when during the kidnapping of Dax and that, I kind of once you found out like what they were doing and why they were trying to kidnap her and that, I got this little inclination of like the Nazi hunters and that from Israel.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
The Nazi hunters in Israel. The what were the council called in Battlestar after the occupation? Who started picking out all the occupiers on Battlestar, and they all just started disappearing because they were airlocking them.
Yeah. Can't remember their name in that, but yeah, I do remember that.
I mean, this is only like one person, right? But still, like it's got that very like bagging, tagging, and gonna have a basically a sham trial, and they're gonna kill her. So yeah.
But it did bring up a lot of great, yes, they did have a warrant for the Dax symbiont and that, but Cisco was actually pretty brilliant in that, managing to sort out like basically how to keep Dax on DS9 long enough and that to get a trial, not by citing that this is a Bajoran station and that there's nothing to do with the Federation.
It's such a baller move on his part, right? It's definitely because that relationship between the Federation and Bajor early on DS9 is very rocky. But the fact that he uses it to his advantage in this episode was very clever on his part.
Cisco Sedan.
And I loved the Arbiter. She was so great. She's like, I want this done before dinner. And then takes like 8 recesses. We were all making fun of that while we were watching the episode last night, or the other night. You wanted this to be done, and you took like 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour recesses.
I love that actress who plays her.
She's so good. I confused her. I thought that she was the secretary from West Wing, but where I figured out she's Jim Carrey's secretary in Liar Liar.
Yes.
I finally figured it out. It's so good. This is a fun, I don't want to say it's a fun episode. It's a very deep episode. It's very dramatic. I love that, this really tests the limits of Ben and Curzon's relationship, because these are two people that are supposed to be very close. Like the fact that Ben still calls Dax old man, how close they were, and even still had pretty deep secrets. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of forced him to confront the fact that, like, it's like while Curzon was his friend and that, he recognized that, Curzon was not a perfect person.
No, not in the slightest. Yeah. I feel like we need to mention Quark, because poor Quark got screwed out of his bar in this episode. But hopefully he made up the funds.
Recovered.
He recovered. He always does.
How about that with Odo and that? Basically bringing in building code and that to force this.
It's so Odo. I also, when we were watching the episode we'll talk about next, Rules of Engagement, I think it's hilarious in every single one of these courtroom dramas. It's like, it's just on point at every moment. When Cisco's like, good news or bad news, Odo goes, it's bad news. It's always bad news at like the worst possible time with Odo. This is a good episode, and I want to get into it more because this was, listen, like this was the 90s, like we, I don't want to say we weren't talking about trans rights, because we were, but it wasn't as big of a subject as it is now. But this episode seemed to make a big statement about trans rights at the time, whether they were attempting to do that or not. I know Ira Bird is very progressive, and I wouldn't put it past him to be sneaking it past all the Paramount executives back then. But do you agree with that? Like your thoughts on this?
If it wasn't in their minds, like, it definitely plays out as an allegory for trans rights, like now, and it's very possible, like DC Fontana was the co-writer on this episode. Can't remember.
Yeah, we when we watched the opening credits, like, yeah, this was a DC Fontana episode.
Yeah. But yeah, there was like an argument. There is an argument being played out in that, about how Curzon and Jadzia were not the same person, in that they share the symbiont's mind, but the host's psychological and biological differences are not shared, and they do in fact make the hybrid like a completely different person. Yeah. And you cannot judge them in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. And Colin writes very accurately, even if it wasn't meant to be at the time a statement on trans right, if you go back and watch that episode now, I mean, you could show that as that. It really is a statement for it now.
Yeah. I kind of get the impression that they really do.
I do too. DS9 was very progressive, and Iris stuck it to Rick Berman a lot during that time and put a lot of progressive shit in DS9 for the better, obviously. So yeah, no, I absolutely think it was. And going deeper into that, right? And we get a little bit of this in Discovery, right? With Adira and how the Trills look down, on them. And this is kind of like, it's not exactly the same thing, but they're basically fighting for Adira's right to be a Trill. We're talking about the right for a symbiote to live in a new host and not be tried for the past, the symbiote's crimes. And that's the question to come out of this. Can a host be put on trial for a previous host's actions? It's a big question. Like,
it gets tricky, right?
Yeah.
So like the question of a crime following a person whose identity has changed, like in very much this, a dramatic way of that, as the Trill, and that it's brought up in the episode. That it's like, the Trill have kind of like a perfect loophole in that. It's like a symbiont could have committed a murder 100 years ago, and been through like 2 or 3 hosts by that point. And that, so does the new does the symbiont still carry the blame? I can't answer that.
I can't either. I'm actually very torn on this, because that's one of the questions on here, right? Like, does being a Trill help you subvert the law a little bit? And I think the answer, according to what happens in this episode, listen, Dax is innocent, right? Like, we know there's an affair there, but Dax is innocent. Curzon's innocent, whether, he's guilty of other things. But would you be able to put, let's say, Ezri on trial for, something that Dax may have done, that Jadzia may have done? Not that, Jadzia did anything, but like, that is the question. And it's hard to have a straight answer, because I can't tell you, right?
Yeah.
Because you, like you said, you can't separate them without one or the other dying. It's a very thin line.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, in a way, the episode kind of, the ending basically is a way to negate having to actually tackle the question.
It is. It is, because it's kind of, they put a cherry on top, right? You get the he was in my bed. Yeah,
Curzon was guilty of something, and that is just not something.
Not murder.
Not murder.
No. It's hard. I mean, what do you do, right? Like, you could try the symbiont, right? And you could give a sentence to a symbiote, but you wouldn't be able to enforce it. Like,
no, not without violating the host's rights.
Not exactly. So in that situation, like, do you give the symbiont like a record, and that has to live with the current host? Is that the answer here? That the symbiote can be tried, they just kind of can't have any true repercussions?
Again, like, this would be new law on that. I mean, we'll go back to Measure of a Man, where Card said you have to set new law on that, because, like, this is something that we can't answer.
Yeah.
But like, it's not so much in being able to, you could possibly find the symbiont guilty in that, but it's the application of punishment that it becomes a tricky question.
It's interesting because we're not going to be talking about this episode, but you remember that episode with Miles, and he I don't think he actually does commit the crime, but he's charged guilty of it, and
I know the one you're
is
talking
mentally put in prison for some crazy amount of time, and he has the PTSD after it, which is, it's still extremely screwed up. But I'm like, is that the answer? Like, do you enforce that technology on Trills? That's still violating the host's rights, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of Miles and that, like what he was experiencing was basically torture, and then to to write it off and saying like, he wasn't actually harmed,
right?
Which is not necessarily true in that, because like, he carried that PTSD with him, and that he was supposed to basically live out the rest of his life like this,
and he felt it. Yeah
with that PTSD, and it's he basically thought he was responsible for a murder. And
Julian even was like, listen, I can make this a little bit better, but I'm not going to be able to fully remove it. Like, you're going to live with this for the rest of your life. So it's hard. This is a very, very tricky thing. And we can't really answer it because we never do get an answer on Star Trek from it, unfortunately. But it's interesting to talk about. Like, I really like this episode because of that, right?
Yeah.
It would be really interesting. I don't think they would do it with Adira in Discovery. It's not that kind of show, but if, I don't know, like Strange New Worlds, but I don't think we know the Trill yet in that at that point in time.
Probably not.
So I don't know. It would be really interesting to go back to, though. I don't know. We'll see. Any other thoughts on Dax before we move on?
I think we've covered everything. Any comments we want to?
Haven wrote, I think that if they were going to put a Trill on trial, they should really do it if there was time before giving it to a new host. I mean, and
then you go back to like the argument about, if a Trill manages to evade its crime or its evade capture, and that they just wait out the period, get a new host, and that, and then you're thrown back into the same legal quandary.
And I don't think a Trill symbiont could defend itself, right? It needs a host to be able to speak, even though they're ridiculously smart and sentient. There's no way. So, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Haven writes, in Trials and Tribulations, Zach says that her host knew Bones before he joined Starfleet. It's true. Yeah.
Oh,
yep. It's very true. Yep.
Haven with the facts.
Haven's the encyclopedia tonight. Loving it. I'm loving it. Let's move on then to one of my favorite episodes of DS9 ever, and that is Rules of Engagement. We're going back full circle to some good old Klingon law. Kapla.
Kapla.
Your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, it is a great episode. It kind of took the courtroom aspect of Star Trek and that and turned it on its ear a bit. So no holodecks and that, but we do get these recreations in it, but it's more of a mind's eye kind of thing,
which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And
it brings up this great issue about character and that, I'll get into it, once we actually start discussing it, but it was a really great way of breaking up the usual kind of court-martial episode that we see.
I really like the Klingon Arbiter in this episode. Karen watched this one with me, and she looked up the actor right away, and I can't remember his name. Maybe she can hear me. She'll pull it up for me. But he definitely. All right, wait, what was it? Ron Canada. His name is Ron Canada, the actor, and he seems to play like the courtroom guy in almost everything he's in. He's a great actor. He was really good in this episode. I love the way that he got under Worf's skin in this episode. I really go ahead,
because our interactions with Klingons are like almost exclusively like warriors, generals, and anybody involved in the military and that. It's like, and yet there's this whole other life to Klingons and that. There's scientists, there's there's they're lawyers, and to see him be as a to approach the law as aggressively as a Klingon warrior approaches combat.
Yeah. What I liked about this too, though, going back to Judgment, this is once again the Klingon Empire using the word of law as an outlet for a very ulterior motive, which seems to be something they like to do a lot. They wanted to, kind of put the Federation, like having to go on defense, and they almost pulled it off, right?
Yeah.
Because, God, what if there were those families and kids? Like, Worf's guilty. Like, Worf's guilty,
But it also sees the Klingons kind of operating on a new level of the battlefield, right? Not just smashing and like destroying civilization, that using public sentiment
and intellect, like, which, I mean, not saying Klingons aren't smart, because Klingons are hella smart when they want to be, but this is definitely a new way of doing business for them in a unique situation for them, which I really enjoyed. Love that it was a Vulcan admiral doing the hearing, because logic's always going to win out. Avery Brooks is especially wonderful in this episode. I love when the Arbiter gets under Worf's skin enough where Worf knocks him to the ground, and Sisko just, his eyes roll, and it's the best eye roll ever. Just like, God damn, man, you really want to lose this trial, don't you? Like,
one job.
Yeah, you want to get extradited to Kronos, don't you? It's this. I love this episode. I love the courtroom aspect of it. And let's get into it some more. I kind of mentioned this already, but it's most compelling to me because had the Klingons not staged this to happen, Worf is guilty. Like, Worf, I mean, maybe not guilty, but Worf made the wrong move, right? At least in Starfleet's eyes. And he would have had to pay for that, because Starfleet would have made him pay for it. He maybe would have gotten demoted or possibly thrown out. Maybe Starfleet would have cooperated with the Empire and extradited him. It definitely, he doesn't help his case when he strikes the Arbiter either. Like, thoughts on how Worf handled himself during this hearing?
I kind of approached it from a different angle than that when I was looking at this, and that because it had to do with the idea of character being brought up in
heart, right? His heart.
Yeah, and like character is something it's highly just basing something on character in court is like kind of highly disputable, and that like you've seen like whole lines of questioning kind of get thrown out, and that where it's because it's hard to argue about what a person was or wasn't thinking during a commission of a crime that they're on trial for.
Yeah.
So as far as Worf and that, like he was being painted like by this guy very effectively in that proceeding up to it, and actually during the commission of the act as wanting to be he was portrayed as the atypical Klingon in that just like wanting battle, wanting glory, and that, not thinking ahead
and feeling that like the bloodlust of being a Klingon when you're in the captain seat of the Defiant, right? Yeah. I'm gonna go over to Twitch real quick because we have some fun facts.
Fun fact time.
Haven writes, Ron Canada was a leading candidate for the role of Martok, which is very interesting. I could see that. I could very much see that. That's very cool to know. And from Colin, he was actually a semi-regular on the West Wing too, which yes, he was. So it makes perfect sense that he was an Arbiter. Oh, you need to watch the West Wing. This is what Karen said to me years and years ago, and I think I binged the series in like 2 weeks. It's worth the watch. It's really good.
Telling I feel the same way about The Wire.
Yeah.
You gotta watch it.
I need to watch The Wire. I really do. I think that while I agree that using one's character can be highly disputed in court, it's a little bit different when like Klingon DNA is like this is Klingon DNA we're talking about, right? Like is the Klingon like warrior bloodlust just something that's been passed down enough through family culture, or is it something that's in their DNA? Like I tend to go with they are a warrior race. It is in their DNA. So can that character then be, put into question?
In the case of Worf, I think it kind of disputes that whole claim that it's like it's in their blood that they're
because he was raised by humans.
He was raised by humans and that, and joined Starfleet and that, and it's like obviously there's a code of conduct in Starfleet and that Worf is always adhered to. So he's
when it's been convenient for him, it didn't stop him from killing Duras. when
true.
he killed Kolar.
But then again, like extreme circumstances and that, and yeah, the prosecutor played on that. You know, he
did. He said like, what, you are Klingon, or you are like your human side comes out when it's convenient, and your Klingon side comes out when it's convenient. And that was
also took a personal shot too in that when he mentioned Alexander.
Yes, yeah,
and that's when the war, snapped.
Fisticuffs.
Yeah, no, when it comes, it's like, but again, Worf. When it's a personal relationship, and that Worf is driven to extremes. But
yes,
Worf has always been the exception to the rule of like the Klingon.
Yes.
Yeah.
True. All right. Where was I? There we go. I really like the end of this episode because I mentioned to you how I think that had Worf, fired on this ship and destroyed it with all these people on, like, it would have been bad for Worf. Like, either repente for Worf, or either the demotion to ensign for life, or possibly a Federation penal colony. Sisko just straight up like, you can't make decisions like that in Starfleet. Like, you have the and Haven was actually asking the point, is this the episode where Ben tells him that he'll never make captain because what he didn't know, he saves Jadzia at the expense of a mission, and that's what ultimately puts the black mark on his record, which in the books gets expunged and he becomes captain of the Enterprise in the Picard prequel novel, which I hope in season 3 becomes canon. I'm looking at you, Terry Matalis. I'm looking at you, Captain Worf.
Hope.
Please. Because Sisko's like, listen, man, like, you have 3 pips. You're a lieutenant commander. That's going to be a full commander strip not too long, and it's going to be a captain strip even sooner, like sooner than you think. Like, you have to start thinking like that. You're commanding the Defiant night in, night out. We're at war. You can't make decisions like that. Is that the Klingon way? Yes. Is it the Starfleet way? No. How do you think that Sisko handled that situation?
See, I'm a little bit conflicted in that because personally, I think Worf, made the right call in the moment. Yeah, like obviously, like during the battle, things get done in the heat of battle. But we know that the Klingons set this up from the beginning of that. Like, there was a passenger carrier under cloak and that suddenly decloaked all of a sudden.
It's sketchy for a passenger carrier to just decloak. I will concede that point for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if it wanted, if it wanted to, again, maybe it was, they were trying to hide, but like, again, why would they decloak that? But anyways, it had to do with like, they were under attack, and that the bird of prey had displayed this whole shoot cloak tactic, and that, so it was like, it was meant to draw Worf into a shooting match, and
well, that's like the love of the hunt for war. Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably just took the words out of your mouth. Sorry.
As we know in that, it's like when they decloak, you get one opportunity before the shields go up and that. So, again, you can't dispute that Worf was played in this encounter. Yeah. But I think Sisko did handle it quite well in that. He said, you got to be smarter. You got to be better than your enemy.
Yeah. I thought that Sisko handled it about the same way Jean-Luc handled it when Worf killed Duras. He's like, do you want to stay in Starfleet? Because this is how you don't stay in Starfleet. Like, you cannot do that. Even though afterwards he's like, isn't it time you get your honor back? He's like, I have to tell you off. I know that you had to kill Duras, but I have to tell you off. But also, like, let's get your honor back, man. It's about time. And Sisko the same way, like, dude, you have to think more like a Starfleet officer sometimes. You fucked up, but also, like, we got to work on making that, a captain strip. So, yeah.
It's a very good comparison.
Yeah.
Because like Picard was, basically saying you're not just, a Klingon. You're not just the sum of your parts, and that you're part of a larger whole now.
Yeah.
So you have to be better than that.
And definitely some people agreeing with you, Hawk. I'm seeing Colin say I think Worf was. Oh no, sorry. I was saying Sisko is right. I think Captain Angel is saying that you're right. Yeah, it's divided. It is a good thing to be divided on. These are always good questions, and that is law. Before we get into the next episode, let's take a sidebar to the character of Worf, because Picard season 3 will be here sooner than you know it in February. If we're going by canon, as where Worf is right now, when we last see him on DS9, he is getting promoted to be the ambassador to Kronos, or the ambassador. Yes, the ambassador to Kronos for the Federation. I believe in Nemesis or Insurrection, he says something along the lines of that's gone, and that's why he's back on the Enterprise. We know at that point, too, that he has that black mark on his record for saving Jadzia. He cannot be promoted to captain. Now, with Star Wars and the expanded universe and then all becoming legends, that stuff is in no shape, way, or form considered canon. Now, some stuff in Star Trek novels and comics is being considered kind of canon. Some things are being made canon from those. If the Picard prequel novel, which I consider to be canon right now until it's not, nothing has really contradicted anything that's happened in that book yet. So I'm considering it canon. It's called Last Best Hope. Then when Jean-Luc is in his meeting as he's being promoted to Admiral, they're going over the logistics. Well, listen, you have to leave the Enterprise if you're getting this promotion and lead a different ship and lead this rescue fleet. Who's captain of the Enterprise? And Jean-Luc doesn't even hesitate. He just goes, Worf. And the Admiralty is like, well, what about this black spot on his record? Like, who doesn't have something like this on their record? Who hasn't done who hasn't done something like this? But besides that argument, go ahead.
Riker.
Yeah,
Riker was involved. Riker was involved in the cover-up with the Pegasus.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, like, everybody's got something, and they all agree, too, that it would make for really good a relationship booster between the Empire and the Federation, having a Klingon captain of the flagship, of Starfleet. So I'm really hoping that that's canon in Picard season 3. That's made canon. I've seen arguments on both sides saying that it's not going to happen. Some saying that it is going to happen.
The only thing I can say is that Star Trek, I think, does a better job of keeping its various media outlets under the same umbrella of the universe.
What I've been noticing is that the prequel stuff, especially the novels and the Picard novels that they've been coming out, is that they're being very careful not to contradict anything from those. Where the Coda trilogy that just happened, that was basically their version of killing off the Star Wars expanded universe. So I will be curious to see if this is canonized, because please. It could be a simple throwaway, like, hey, I was captain of the Enterprise E, we were in a skirmish, it was destroyed, I'm not captain of the Enterprise F, right? It could be as easy as that, and I'll be happy. So we are going from DS9 to Voyager, and Q's debut in Star Trek Voyager with Death Wish. Hawk, your thoughts on this one? Hold on, I forgot to do...
This one, it was a great way of bringing the Q into this and that, and not just Q, but Q, two Qs in that, and presenting a conundrum only Janeway could have basically helped to dispute.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I think Picard could have disputed this one too. I think those two would have been the best captains to dispute this issue.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what. Well, obviously we're going to get into it, but yeah, it's one of those moral conundrums, and that it's and it's something that was basically ripped from the headlines of the time, with all the press like Jack Kevorkian got and everything.
Yes, yeah, and it's it hits hard even today, because suicide has gone up, and there's also been more talk about assisted suicide, and if that should be a thing, and it's becoming, and I'm not saying it's becoming commonplace, but it's being more of an idea that's accepted. This episode is definitely relevant to current times, and rightfully so, as we get into it, a legal gray area, and especially in this country, about the right to die. Like when you think it's time to go, that opportunity to be able to say, hey, it's time for me to go, I'm gonna off myself. Whether that's an incurable ailment, or if we're talking about in the Star Trek universe, something as mystical, or as immortality, if we're talking about fantasy vampires, I'm done, I've lived 3,000 years, I'm gonna put a stake through my heart. physical, in this episode, physical suffering, though maybe he is physically suffering. He wasn't a comet. The question in this one though is psychological torment for being alive for it's not even thousands of years for Q, or we'll call him Quinn because we'll call it John Delancey Q.
Yeah.
The psychological torment of being alive for God knows how long. He's hiding out in the Big Bang, so being in an extraordinary circumstance is that for choosing to end one's life.
Yeah, this one always makes it. There was this movie years ago, and that back when I was in high school, we did this like little law class and that, and we watched this movie. It's called Whose Life Is It Anyways? It's a 1981 movie starring Richard Dreyfuss. He played the sculptor who was involved in the car crash that left him as a quadriplegic.
Yeah,
just reliant on other people, hospitalizations for infections, muscle deteriorations, and he actually goes to court to argue for the legal right to end his life. And this always played out when I watched this episode, and that psychological torment. We've seen like the effects of it in that episode with O'Brien we were just talking about.
Yep.
Imagine just being locked in your mind. Your dependence, is on on other people and on hospitals to keep you alive. Yeah, when you're. I know that it's hard not to talk about in terms that kind of seem a little ableist, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But at the same time, when you're in his case, and the psychological torment was that there was no growth. We got to see the Q continuum in that, and they had basically stopped communicating with each other in that because, when you're a race of omnipotents who know everything and that, what's there left to talk about? And where does growth come from after that? There's no emotional growth, no intellectual growth left in that. It's a plateau.
Yeah.
And it's like when you have plateaued in that, it's like, and there's nowhere left to go. It is basically like it's going to be like just basically like O'Brien sitting in that cell, scribbling, symbols into a dirt over and over and over again.
Yeah. And when you're talking about a race like the Q Continuum, they can't die. They cannot die. So when someone wants to die, I mean, like listen, if we're talking Star Trek or we're talking real world, I am a big proponent of assisted suicide. I know. If I ever get a terminal illness, like I don't want to suffer, or when I grow old and they have me connected to tubes and shit, like I want someone to pull the plug. Like I don't ever want to be, in a position like that. So I'm a big proponent of it. In this case, if I was a judge, if I was a jury, I would vote in favor of Quinn in this because it is psychological torment. Like what is there left for someone to do who has basically been around since the birth of the universe, right? Or maybe not the birth of the universe, but we don't know that much about the Q Continuum. Maybe they were there. Maybe they were born with the universe.
I mean, if they weren't, they can just as easily go back to the beginning of it. We've seen that.
Yeah. So I do think that there is an argument for, psychological torment being a factor in wanting to end one's life. You really feel for O'Brien. Like, I know that Julian helps him, through it a bit, but and he does have a huge support system and he has a family, and those are things to think about. But that's a hard argument you bring up, Hawk, because I don't know if I would grant something like that to a Miles O'Brien who has a lot left to live for. But
in the case of Miles and that, it was there was help available in that. It's like Miles did not have to commit suicide, and we find out at the end, obviously it's like his friends kind of pull him back from the edge and that. But in other cases in that, like this, like with the Q and that, you got to look at it like in terms of a sick person too. It's like, and these are decisions that are made every day. They're called quality of life decisions, and it's like for people who are elderly and who are dying of terminal diseases and, maybe dependent upon like machines and medicines and that, just to extend life and that, you start having to ask the big questions that what meaning does that life have left?
Yeah.
And they're believe me, anyone listening who thinks I'm just advocating for suicide, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
But there are there are big questions that you have to ask in those cases.
Yep. And listen, by the end of it, we know that, Q brings in all these ridiculous witnesses to say, to argue against it. And then by the end, he's the one who helps him out and assists him in, living his final moments and really helps change Q's mind. Because Q's always been, as much as Q lives for the continuum, Q's also been his own form of progressive within the continuum, right? Like he always wants to see the continuum evolve and grow. And he didn't really see this is evolving and growing until it was right in front of him. And I find that very interesting at the end of this episode.
Yeah, I know. Q has always been such a complex character and an omnipotent who is somehow affected by his interactions with the TNG crew. They make him question even his own indomitable omnipotence and intellect. He is the exception to the rule. And if I remember correctly, and that whole Civil War starts in the Q continuum.
It does. It's in Voyager. Yeah, like Q becomes very close with Janeway. It's funny how much Janeway and Jean-Luc's careers kind of parallel each other, right? Because Jean-Luc is an expert on the Borg. He's the expert, the one on trial for humanity for the Q continuum. And then Janeway, I think, almost outdoes Jean-Luc, as even though she was technically assimilated as the expert on the Borg, and then comes close, doesn't ever have a romantic relationship, but comes pretty close to having a romantic relationship with Q. Like two captains, experts on very big things in the universe. I think that's very, very interesting. Let's move on this one. That was your question, Hawk, that you added, right? Yeah, that was a good one. I don't really know how much to add on this one because I know that we talked earlier. I don't know how much of the season of the Orville you watched. They tackled suicide.
That's the first one. They tackled it very badly,
very poorly. If you'd like, I wrote a whole article about it on the Strange New Pod blog. Shameless plug there. I thought they handled it really poorly. I think going back into the 90s, early 2000s, this handles it better than that handled it. I'm going to read a comment here from Takako. My grandmother passed at 101 years old last month. She was able to pass in her own home, but by the end of her life, she was bedridden and had to be spoon-fed. I wondered what kind of quality of life she was able to enjoy, and that is a very important question.
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with how basically when it comes to that level, it's a psychological level, and that what kind of if you're surrounded by friends and family and you have a very active mind in that, it's like, yes, live as long as you possibly can in that,
Yeah.
But I'm going through, some very bad things right now with my mother and that, she's only 80 in that, but her quality of life is not slowly, but rapidly starting to deteriorate.
Very sorry. Yeah. Hawk, I think we've talked about this because we kind of share similar experiences. My cousin Gabi, her husband, they had found early pancreatic cancer, and but he had early signs of dementia. So the surgeons had kind of given her an option and said, "Listen, we can do this surgery, and it'll probably, we caught it early enough, and pancreatic cancer, it's usually the worst, but we caught it early enough where, this will kind of take care of the issue, but the anesthesia is going to rapidly increase the dementia." And she had to make the choice whether to let him keep his mind for a little longer and, die of pancreatic cancer, which is also brutal, or have the surgery. And she ended up having the surgery. And when I tell you that his quality of life was awful, I got to experience it it was years, Hawk, years that he went through this. And you're never the one who wants to say you did the wrong thing and I never did, or but it was such the wrong decision, you're watching someone suffer and have no quality of life. And after he passed, she went through her mind went in dementia, and I have to say, luckily for her, it didn't take long. Once she kind of deteriorated, it went fast, and I'm glad that she didn't have to go through that. And that also, again, it just brings up the question of quality of life,
Yeah.
So, yeah. As we get deep here on Strange New Pod, which seems to happen quite a bit. Yeah, very relevant episode to assisted death and assisted suicide. Anything else on this one before we move on?
Yeah, it's almost one of those questions that's impossible for the courts to decide. One way or the other.
Yeah, I know that you can go to Switzerland, and do that, and they're very. It's a beautiful thing that you can go and do there. And I think in Portland, I think you can go take like a pill in Portland if you have like in a certain type of cancer. There's the laws here are very strict, mostly everywhere. So, yeah. Draft is back. The pod is very sad because I'm not there. I don't know, Giraffe. You've been on some sad pods too before, so I don't know about that one, but yeah. Anything else? Is it mailbag time?
I think it's mailbag time.
I think it is mailbag time. Let's do it. It is the mailbag.
Hailing frequencies are open. Hailing frequencies are open.
It's repeating. That was fun. Hawk, why don't you hit it with the first one with Havens?
Right.
So real quick, the question was for mailbag this week. It was our Strange Loop. Going back to that, it was if you could go back to any moment in Star Trek and put someone on trial for something that they got away with, who would it be and why? Go ahead.
So Haven wrote, I would put Riker on trial, even though he was cleared of it by the end of the episode when he was temporarily given the power of the Q. What?
He didn't do anything wrong.
No, and if he did, it was just fixed like that. So it doesn't even count. It's like a do-over.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that one bit.
Yeah.
Fernando wrote, well, Kirk stole the Enterprise to go after Spock. Well, he did stand trial for that.
Yes.
And he was demoted.
Yeah.
Though,
yeah.
Was that really like, that was, speaking of sham trials, we're like, so you probably would have been ejected from Starfleet from this, but because you saved the world again and brought back whales from 1984, we're just going to give you the Enterprise. So congratulations on your demotion.
Kirk was always bulletproof when it came to those things. It's like, oh, I'm going to be back on Earth for a trial. Well, for save the universe again.
Yeah.
Boom. Wayner wrote, since I just poured myself some coffee, it's a good time to post this.
Hold on, wait. Don't finish it yet. All right, keep going.
Okay. Janeway, let's take it to a court of law. Should she have killed Tuvix?
I'm bleeping Tuvix, goddammit. No for Tuvix. No, the court has spoken. Tuvok and Neelix were two separate people. A transporter malfunction happened. It shouldn't have ever happened. No. We don't talk about Tuvix on this podcast. Ever. Kidding, we just did twice.
That which should never have existed.
Yeah, exactly. Cassie wrote, I'm an unapologetic Enterprise fan who thinks Archer was a good captain, but I would for sure put him on trial for several things that happened across the series. I would also love to see Sisko on trial after In the Pale Moonlight, just to see what the fallout would be. Let's talk about that for a second, because he should be put on trial for that, but he never will because Starfleet technically approved his operation.
And he had plausible deniability.
He did. That was kind of the perfect assassination.
Right? The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. I mean, morally, it seems like way the hell out there on that, but as far as the law is concerned, it's kosher.
Giraffe with a good one. Commodore O has some explaining to do.
Oh, yes, she does.
Yes, she does. Why don't you continue with Chris's?
Chris wrote, I want to see Byrne actually stand trial. Is that Byrne?
Bem.
Or
Bem.
Stand trial. It doesn't matter if he helped free the crew. He was shady and couldn't get away with it.
I had to figure out what this was, and apparently it's from the animated series, so I'm oblivious. I'm oblivious. Okay. Wayner on Twitch wrote, putting Janeway on trial would be an epic drama, though. I would watch it. Don't get me wrong. I would watch the Tuvix trial. Is Janeway in the right? Goddamn right. Every single time, no question. The fact that this comes up so much on Twitter, like the whole Tuvix argument, is mind-boggling to me.
It's just trolling, but at the same time, it's still fun to think about.
Yeah. This is a great one. Jessica wrote, I'd like to see Brunt on trial for crimes against the family of Nagus Rom. For real, that dude terrorized Quark and family, and I'm not sure he broke some of the rules of acquisition in the process. Like, not insulting a Ferengi's mother, all bets were off once he dragged slandering Ishka into it.
Right? I actually agree with this one. Brunt was unnecessarily like fixated on Quark and that and trying to bring him down. Like, remember when like Quark thought he was dying and sold his body to him? Yeah. He's like, I want the body.
Yes.
I bought it. It's mine. How will you want to do this?
Giraffe, hashtag Janeway did nothing wrong ever, and that is a fact. God damn right. I love Janeway. Give me a Janeway show. Wait, we have one. It's Prodigy. When is that coming back? Go ahead with Zendara's Hawk.
So Zendara wrote, ooh, considering TAS adds so many more options. I got one. Carter Winston got off light, if you ask me.
Again,
I don't know.
This is where Giraffe would come in handy because she'd watch the animated series. I have no idea what that means. So one day I will go through all of the animated series. Today is not that day. I'll close it out with Tallulah's. I'd love to see Vosh go on trial just to see and hear more of her adventures. That would be really cool. I'd watch that. Yes.
And yes. She did some shady shit.
She did do some shady shit. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Anybody? I love the Strangely Looped this week. Before we end, is there anyone else that we would want to see go on trial? I'm trying to think. There's got to be more, right? I mean, I could put Archer on trial for like 1,000 different things.
Yeah, dozens and dozens.
Dozens. Right? I mean, Mariner could probably go on trial for some of the shady shit she's done. But we love that about her.
Mariner's more of a disciplinary case.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably think of 1,000, but I think we'll leave it at what we have tonight. It's been a good show, Hawk. It's been a good show. We're not done with Law and Order. We're not quite done yet. We are going to come back with some more Law and Order next week. And Giraffe, if you could tell me in the chat real quick the person's name, the full name, because I forget the full name, and if we're allowed to announce that yet. And if we are, I will, because we are probably going to have a guest. I'm waiting for the confirmation. Waiting. I wish I had the Jeopardy button on here. Ding, 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 ding. I could always edit this out. I'll just play this again while we wait for Draft's answer.
Ooh, this is the new shuttle with the blast shield. Yeah. The blast shield is the blast shield.
Here we go.
We got it.
Josh Gillian.
Yes, so we're going to have Josh Gillian from Legal Geeks on next week. And this is going to be a really fun episode because we are going to deep dive the implications of both Captain Freeman and number one, Una's upcoming trials, because they're both going to have a trial. Captain Freeman for destroying Pakled Planet and Una for breaking Starfleet protocol for joining Starfleet and being an augment, being an Illyrian. And we're going to deep dive their cases. If they have a case, if they're guilty, innocent, it's going to be a great show. I'm really excited for that one. And it's a great way to take us in to Lower Deck Season 3.
Good.
Yep. So,
all right.
That is going to do it for this one. Hawk, this has been fun. It was fun just geeking out, you and me.
It was good. I was a little worried. It was like 2 was good.
No, we still managed to go long, which is it still happens somehow. Can't wait for next week. Can't wait for 2 weeks. A reminder, in just 4 days, Lower Deck Season 2 rewatch begins. Can't wait to experience that all with you again. We're going to call it a night. For Hawk, I'm Julian. I will say live long and prosper, Majram, and good night.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.